Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This is the continuation of Reformation. This will be Part 7, Chapters 9 and 10. Chapter 9. 2 days. 2 days and no sign of the heroes. No email back, no report on the news, nothing. Deku was starting to get worried. Did Eraserhead not take the email seriously? There should have been some sort of movement by now, right? Had Eraserhead even read the email? Toga had offered to snag some blood and make a trip to UA to see what the pro-hero was doing, but Deku had shot the idea down. It was too risky. If the heroes figured her out, she'd be arrested on the spot, and if Shigaraki found out, he'd kill her. Deku had considered hacking the UA camera system to see if he could spot the underground hero, but decided against it after he realized that Nezu was most likely the one to design it. Deku knew he was reckless, but he didn't have a death wish. He knew better than to mess with Nezu. Maybe it was time for drastic measures. With a sigh, Deku opened a new tab and began typing another email to Eraserhead. He attached another video, this time of a Yakuza thug dragging the girl out of her room, and he attached the blueprint of the basement and labs. Deku typed up a quick message and sent it, sitting back in his seat. If that doesn't get him moving, I don't know what will, he mumbled to himself. Toga sat up from where she was sprawled on the bed, a groggy look on her face as she yawned. What are you doing, Deku-kun? Trying to get Eraserhead to get off his ass. Ooh, let me see, Toga said excitedly, scrambling out of the bed and looking over his shoulder to see the email that he just sent. She snorted, once before starting to read aloud. Eraserhead, are you too busy fucking your husband to save an imprisoned child, or are you just lazy? Do you need some more proof that she's in danger? How about this video? Here's some blueprints for the building and her cell. Get up and come get her. Let me know if I need to prop the door open for you or something. Damn, Deku, you really have no chill. And is Eraserhead really married? Deku nodded. Yeah, it's not common knowledge, but I figured it out. You'll never guess who. Do I get a hint? He's loud. Toga paused and thought for a moment. Suddenly, she gasped. It's All Might! No, dumbass. It's Present Mike, literally the loudest hero out there. You make an excellent point, but please consider this. I am stupid. Deku shook his head, laughing. You're not stupid, Toga. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Before she could respond, Deku's computer chimed, alerting them to the fact that there was a new email. They looked back to the screen, and both of them had smiled when they saw who it was from. I thought that email might get his attention. Mention the husband and he'll panic, Deku said, running multiple programs to ensure the email was safe to open. Let's see what he has to say. Aizawa's phone went off in class, which was a first. His ever-present poker face remained intact as he had pulled his phone from his pocket. When he lit the screen, his eyes went wide. After a moment of fiddling with his phone and reading something, his head snapped up, his gaze set on the confused students. Stay here and study until I get back. Shinso, with me. Now. Shinso was out of his seat before Aizawa even finished the sentence, quickly following after his sensei. He had to lengthen his strides to keep up with Aizawa as they had hurried toward the teacher's lounge. Aizawa-sensei, what's going on? Deku emailed me again. He knows something about me that he shouldn't. Shinso's mouth went dry as he felt a heavy pit in his stomach. He knew how secretive Aizawa was. For this villain to be able to have any sort of information on him was terrifying, but also somehow slightly impressive. When they reached the teacher's lounge, Aizawa threw the door open, startling the scant few teachers that were inside. Mike, we need to talk. Now, Aizawa said, an edge to his voice that clearly put all the teachers on edge. President Mike didn't even question it. He was on his feet and out the door within seconds. When he opened his mouth to ask what was going on, Aizawa put a hand up, signaling for him to be quiet. We need Nezu for this, too. I'll explain as soon as we're in his office. When they got to the principal's office, the door was already open. There was cups of tea set out for each of them. Midnight called and told me that you seemed rather distressed, Aizawa, Nezu said, his voice calm and even. I checked the footage and saw that you were on your way to see me. Please sit. Tell me what the matter is. Shinso let his teachers slip in ahead of him, quietly closing the door to the office behind him. As he sat down, Nezu had nudged one of the cups closer to him. His smile kind, even if his black eyes expressed little emotion. Shinso gladly took it, the warmth of the tea feeling nice against his suddenly cold hands. Deku emailed me again, Aizawa said, pulling his phone out and handing it to Nezu. He knows about Hisashi. Shinso frowned, confused on who Hisashi was. He went to ask what was going on, but was interrupted by President Mike spluttering. Again? What do you mean by that? Deku's emailed you before, and you didn't think to tell me? I didn't want to worry you. Besides, the contents of the email are confidential. It relates to a case I'm working with Shinso. Aizawa paused, running a hand through his hair, a nearly anxious gesture. The only reason I brought you in now is because Deku mentioned you in the email. While that answered Shinso's question, Mike-sensei was Hisashi. This revelation only raised more questions, though. Why was Deku talking about President Mike? What did it matter to Aizawa and to the case? And why did Aizawa-sensei call President Mike by his first name? Nezu said nothing but handed the phone to Mike, who had snatched it away to quickly read. As his green eyes had scanned the screen, his face went pale. "Shit," he hissed under his breath. Aizawa shot him a glare. "Don't curse in front of a student." "It's okay, I've heard and said worse. But if someone can explain what's going on, I would really appreciate it," Shinso said, his eyes flicking between the two teachers. Mike handed him the phone. As soon as Shinso saw the word husband, he nearly dropped both his tea and the phone. Aizawa snatched it away, pocketing his phone again. He kept his gaze fixed on the ground, looking almost nervous. "Now you know. You're not allowed to tell anyone, and I mean anyone. Do I make myself clear?" Shinso wordlessly nodded before taking a shaky sip of his tea. Mike was looking over at him, a careful and calculating look in his eyes that Shinso had never seen before. "Do you have any questions, little listener?" Took a moment, but Shinso eventually had managed to clear his throat and speak. "You guys are gay, then?" "I am," Aizawa said, still not looking at Shinso. Mike raised his hand. "I'm bi, and before you ask, Sho and I have been together since high school, got married when we were 23, no kids, but we do have 2 cats. We've kept the relationship a secret from everyone except a few close friends and trusted co-workers." Shinso nodded again. Nezu watched the boy carefully, noticing how he was bouncing his knee and biting his lip, his eyes still looking between the 2 teachers. "Shinso, if you have a question, now is the time to ask it," Nezu prompted. "This isn't a topic that I see being brought up again in the future." Heaving a shaky sigh, Shinso let his eyes drop to look at the floor, one of his hands coming up to rub the back of his neck. In that moment, he looked very much like his mentor, which brought a small smile to Nezu's face. "Why did you keep it a secret?" Shinso asked, his tone oddly even and emotionless. "The villains Sho goes up against are the type that would happily try to kidnap and use me against him, so we thought it best to keep our relationship quiet, especially when we first started out. We've considered coming out now that we're more focused on our teaching jobs, but we still haven't made any decision on it." "So, you're allowed to be gay and a hero?" Aizawa almost seemed to shrink into his seat at the question. Mike narrowed his eyes slightly, becoming protective of his husband. "Of course it's allowed. Being gay has no impact on our ability to be good heroes. A number of your peers are gay too, you know this. Shinso, if this is going to be a problem, then maybe you shouldn't be working with Sho for your—" He cut himself off when he saw the tears welling in Shinso's eyes. The boy looked both confused and in awe as he continued to stare at the ground. "I can be gay and be a hero?" he asked, his voice cracking. Aizawa's head whipped up, shock evident on his face. Mike stared on, his mouth hanging open as the boy had teared up. "I thought that I'd have to hide it. I already have a villainous quirk, and I thought that if anyone found out I was gay, I wouldn't be allowed to be a hero. Thought that the commission would pull my license or something, since they're always talking about how heroes have to be perfect role models and stuff like that. I know there are gay heroes, but they're the ones in the spotlight with good quirks like the others in 1A, but Aizawa always says that he gets crap for his quirk like I do, so if he can be gay and be married, then maybe I... Without a word, Aizawa reached across Mike and wrapped Shinso in his arms, letting the boy bury his face into his shoulder. Aizawa petted Shinso's wild purple hair, smoothing it only for it to pop back into place. "It's okay, kid. I get it," Aizawa breathed. "I get it." "I'm so happy," Shinso hiccuped, and then with a gasp, he wrenched himself backwards. "Oh, fuck. A villain knows that you 2 are married. Shit, this is bad." "It's definitely not great," Mike said with a nod. "Who is this girl that Deku's talking about, though? And what is this case?" Took them about 5 minutes to fill Mike in. He listened quietly, nodding along. Once they had finished telling him everything, he didn't speak for a moment, soaking it in. "And we haven't gone to go save the girl because why?" he asked. "We don't have enough information," Aizawa said. "Shinso and I have been patrolling the area, but we don't have enough evidence to legally break in and find the girl." "If there even is a girl, this could be a trap," Nezu pointed out. Mike poked at Aizawa's shoulder and put his hand out, making a give-me gesture. "Let's email Deku back, then. Tell him what we need is actual proof that this is legit. If he provides it, great. If not, then we continue investigating," he said. Aizawa shook his head. "I am not letting you email a random villain, especially not when he's making thinly veiled threats against you." "It's not a thinly veiled threat." "He's making it clear that he knows about you and that he isn't happy with me. It means he'll go after you. This is exactly why we've kept our relationship a secret." "We shouldn't dismiss the idea too quickly," Nezu said, leaning forward in his seat. "Let me craft the email. Please, hand me the phone." Groaning, Aizawa handed him the phone. Nezu took it, read the email one last time, and then began to type. "Deku, you must understand that these things take time," Nezu read aloud as he typed. Can you provide any more evidence regarding this girl? At this point, you have provided little to no evidence that this is a legitimate case. I need assurance that this is not a trap set by the League or by the Yakuza. Sincerely, Eraserhead. Nezu sent the email and then handed the phone back to Aizawa. You could have tried a little harder to sound like Sho, Mike said, almost laughing. Nezu frowned. In all of his emails to me, that is how he sounds. Yeah, because you're my boss. I have to sound professional. Shinzo picked his tea bag up, not caring that it had already gone cold. Let's hope Deku thinks that Aizawa's just being formal because he's talking to a villain. A few minutes later, the phone chimed. Aizawa opened the email and rolled his eyes. It's Deku. Hi, Nezu. Pretty sure I emailed Eraserhead, not you. I guess I should have assumed that he would bring this to you. Maybe you can light a fire under his ass and get him moving. You should sympathize with the kid. The Yakuza are using her for research and experimentation. I can try to get footage of Overhaul and her, but it won't be easy. They don't keep cameras in the rooms that they do the work in. As for the matter of whether or not this is a trap, you're just going to have to take my word for it. No matter what I say, they'll think that this is a trap. All I care about is that the girl is saved and put in witness protection, or something similar. I sent this case to Eraserhead to handle it because he's an underground hero and slightly more trustworthy than the Spotlight heroes. If you have to bring the other heroes in on this, fine. I don't give a shit. Just do your fucking job and save the girl. Deku sure has a mouth on him, Shinzo mumbled. Mike snorted, nodding along. Nezu pressed his paws together and sat back in his chair. How curious, he said, a pensive look on his narrow face. Deku knew right away that it was me that drafted the email, not Aizawa. This means he has a history of reading either my writing or Aizawa's, or perhaps he made the correct assumption that Aizawa would not speak like this to a villain, and, thinking of who Aizawa has the most contact with, concluded I was the one to send the email. Does it really matter? Mike had asked. The bottom line is that this dude is scary smart and possibly spying on all of us. We need to start planning. How could you tell so fast that it was Nezu, Deku-kun? Eraserhead wouldn't care if it was a trap. He's knowingly run into traps like a million times just because it meant that there was a chance of saving someone. There was no way Eraserhead wrote that email. Also, it's the middle of a school day. Only people Eraserhead would talk to about my email would be Present Mike and Nezu, and I don't think that Present Mike has ever signed an email with sincerely in his life, especially not to a villain, so that left Nezu. Your brain scares me sometimes. Chapter 10. There were footsteps in the hall outside of Toga and Deku's door. People were running past, their voices raised. Deku had been dozing, flopped halfway across the end of the bed. Toga had her back against the headboard, her feet resting on Deku's lower back. When they heard the racket outside their room, Deku bolted up, his eyes wide and his chest heaving. Toga whipped out a knife, her teeth bared with a hiss. Neither reacted well to being startled. What the fuck is going on? Deku asked gruffly. Don't know. Come on, Toga said as she had gotten out of the bed, her knuckles white with how tightly she gripped the handle of her knife. Before she opened the door, she picked up Deku's mask and tossed it to him. He quickly slipped it on and flipped his hood up. As he opened the door and slipped into the hall, something small and fast came flying up and crashed into him, nearly knocking him to the ground. Deku instinctively wrapped his arms around what had hit him, and he stumbled backward into Toga. When he looked down, he found himself staring into bright red, watery eyes of the girl from the lab. Please don't let them hurt me again, she whimpered, clutching him tightly. Eri, time to go back to your room. A cold, steely voice had said. Deku looked up and found himself looking at Overhaul. The masked man walked calmly down the hall, his eyes locked on the girl. Eri. She buried her face in Deku's stomach, whimpering quietly. He found his own hold on the girl tightening. Who's this, Overhaul? Deku asked, trying to keep his voice light. Your daughter? Hardly. Eri, come here. Now. Toga swooped in and ran a hand over the back of Eri's head, smoothing her tangled hair. Hi, Eri-chan. You have such pretty hair. I'd love to braid it. You think I could do that for you? Eri pulled her face out of where she had it hidden in Deku's jacket and looked up at Toga, her red eyes watery. Braid? The girl whispered, seeming almost confused by the word. Overhaul reached out and snagged the girl's arm, wrenching her away from the pair of teens with a forceful pull. Eri let out a sharp cry of pain as she stumbled backwards. We don't have time for this, Overhaul snarled, shoving the girl toward one of his henchmen. The man grabbed Eri, lifted her, tossing her over his shoulder, and walking down the hall. All the while, Eri whimpered and sent a pleading look Deku's way. As Eri disappeared around the corner, Deku calmly tilted his head. Want to tell me who that was? He asked, his gaze cold. You're the analyst. You tell me. Deku paused, running through his options. He could take a risk and lay out his theory, or he could play dumb. He ran through the possible outcomes, weighing the risks and the benefits. Finally making his decision, he spoke. She's your source, isn't she? Somehow, She's used in making your drugs. Is she the source for the quirk removal bullets, or is she the quirk enhancement drugs? Is it her quirk? That is my guess. That or her DNA. Is it made from her blood, or is it from her muscle cells? Muscle cells would be much more substantial than blood cells. What about... Toga elbowed him, breaking him from his rambling. Deku ducked his head, pretending to be embarrassed. I got carried away again. Sorry about that. I've been a fan of science since I was little. Maybe in another life I would have been a scientist. A fan of science? Overhaul asked, narrowing his eyes and cocking his head. You aren't fishing for more information on the girl? I am more curious about the process of creating your drugs. If the process starts with her, then I want to know how. Shigaraki sending me here wasn't a mistake. He sent me so that I could be an asset. It was supposed to be a show of goodwill. He knows that I'm the smartest in the league, and he thought that you knew that too. Toga sniffed and looked down her nose at Overhaul. If you don't want Deku-kun's help, then we'll just go back to sitting in our room. You know, doing nothing and wasting time. Starting to get really boring, though. And you do not want a bored toga on your hands, Deku said. He gave a little shiver, acting as though he were remembering a particularly bad incident. His statement wasn't exactly a lie, though. A bored toga was a dangerous toga. She posed a threat to his sanity when she got bored, always chattering and wanting attention. Overhaul eyed Deku and Toga for a moment before speaking. I will consider what role you will play in this. You will both hear from me soon, he said. With a final glare, he had turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the hall. The pair slipped back into their room. As soon as the door was closed, Deku ripped off his mask and threw himself at his computer, hands flying to the keyboard, quickly pulled up the video footage of the hall, carefully copying the clip of Aries' escape attempt, and her being forcibly dragged back to her room. Deku only paused for a moment to add a quick blur over his head in the footage. He knew Toga didn't care if anyone saw her face, especially since she never bothered to change her name. Then, he attached the video to an email to Eraserhead and sent it with a short message. Is this enough proof? The conference room at Sir Night-Eye's agency was crowded. At the head of the table sat Sir Night-Eye with Mirio just to his right. Next to Mirio was Tamaki, who looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Nijiri was beside him, babbling and pestering poor Sue, who was shrinking back into her seat and leaning into Uraraka. Uraraka was talking animatedly with Kirishima, who sat across the table beside Fat Gum. At the other end of the table, facing Sir Night-Eye, was Nezu. Aizawa was behind him. Shinso between him and Kirishima. And finally, beside Fat Gum were Rocklock and Ryuku. Bubble Girl and Centipeter were still setting things up for the meeting, bustling around the room. Shinso could tell that Sir Night-Eye's patience was nearly at its limit. He was glaring at the room, his face growing more stern every time that someone had made a loud noise. Shinso shot a look at Aizawa, making eye contact with his mentor. Aizawa easily read the look in Shinso's eyes, the two silently communicating their amusement at Night-Eye's suffering. Let's get started, Night-Eye finally said, standing up beside the massive TV screen hanging on the wall. He pulled out a remote from his pocket and pressed a button. Up on the screen, a picture of Overhaul had appeared, creating a somber mood in the room. As you all know, we've been investigating Overhaul and his band of Yakuza thugs, who have been distributing quirk enhancement drugs. We've recently discovered that he is also selling quirk erasing bullets that'll temporarily strip you of your quirk. There's talk about a possible permanent version of these bullets being made. We have nothing concrete yet. Rocklock leaned forward, his crossed arms resting onto the table. Yeah, we know that, Night-Eye. What's the real reason you had us all meet here? He's getting to it, Aizawa snapped, sending an icy look toward the other pro. Thank you, Eraserhead, Night-Eye said with a nod. Eraserhead has recently been contacted by the villain known as Deku. Before he could continue, a murmur went up in the room. The UA students, all besides Shinso, had looked confused, whispering to each other and asking about the villain they had never heard of. The pros looked startled, most having heard very little about Deku. The only things they knew about the villain were that he was smart and he was dangerous. Once everyone quieted, Night-Eye continued. As I was saying, the villain Deku, who is known as an associate of the League of Villains, contacted Eraserhead. He sent an email with footage of a young girl who has clearly been abused and requested that Eraserhead save the girl. The location he gave was the hideout of the Shiei Saikai. Sir Night-Eye pressed another button onto the remote, brought up a video footage of the girl sitting on her bed. The students in the room all let out a small set of gasps. Tamaki fully ducked his head and pressed it into Mirio's firm shoulder, while Nijiri had reached out and grabbed Tsuyu's wrist in one hand. With her other hand, she had reached around behind Tsu to grasp Uraraka's shoulder, almost as though she were trying to keep the girls close to protect them. Fat Gum had turned to look at Aizawa, a serious look on his normally jovial face. When did you get this? Last night? This morning? Have you started drafting a plan for us to go in and get her? I got it about 2 weeks ago, Aizawa said. I had begun to... Fat Gum was out of his seat and towering over Aizawa. Kirishima sunk in his chair, startled by his mentor's sudden movement. Shinso, on the other hand, straightened in his seat and grabbed at the capture scarf hanging from his neck, ready to defend Aizawa. "You let this girl sit in hell for 2 weeks? What kind of hero are you? We should be storming in there right now to try to rescue her." Fatgum had roared, his hands rolled into massive fists. "If I may interject," Nezu said, his calm voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Eraserhead brought this to my attention immediately. Together we've been making plans and preparing for a rescue. We needed more evidence and proof beyond the word of a villain to legally be able to go into the residence to retrieve her. Sir Night-Eye will explain in detail if you'd please sit." Night-Eye gave Nezu a thankful nod as Fatgum grudgingly had returned to his seat. Slowly, Shinso let his hand fall from his capture weapon. "Nezu is correct. They began the process to prepare and save the girl. In the meantime, Deku reached out again to see why no one had taken action. Nezu crafted a response, posing as Eraserhead, which Deku immediately saw through. They asked Deku to provide some more proof that the girl was actually with Overhaul last night. He sent us this video. Shinzo leaned forward at this, wanting to get a good look at the video. Aizawa hadn't shown it to him yet, so he'd be seeing it for the first time with everyone else. The footage showed some men running around in a hall, clearly searching for something. After the men had cleared the hall, the girl came sprinting in. A door suddenly opened, and out stepped a pair of people. The girl ran face first into who Shinzo assumed was Deku. He had a slim build and was rather short. He wore what looked like simple jeans, red shoes, and a black hoodie. A blur had been added in. It was hiding his face and head. Beside him was Toga, clear as day. She was staring at the girl in surprise as Deku wrapped his arms around her. And then, Overhaul stepped into the hall. Some words were exchanged, though the video had no audio so they couldn't hear anything. Toga reached out at one point and gently ran her hand over the girl's hair. Overhaul looked downright murderous as he had grabbed the girl and flung her off to another man, who simply hoisted the girl over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, carrying her away. Night-Eye paused the footage, leaving Overhaul, Deku, and Toga on the screen. "As you can see, we now have proof that the League of Villains is working with Overhaul, and that this girl has been held captive by the Yakuza. I've gathered us all here today to discuss the rescue. This girl is valuable to Overhaul somehow, so while he may be harming her, there's no reason to believe that he will kill her. This gives us a little time to plan and to make sure we get this right." "We should be going and getting her now. She's just a kid," Fatgum snapped. Mirio jumped in, defending Night-Eye. "Sir is right. While I don't like the idea of that girl being there, if we rush in, they could move her, or they could get scared and kill her just to keep her from us. We need to have a 100% perfect plan that won't fail. If we don't, we could end up being the cause of her death." "Well said, Mirio," Night-Eye said, giving him a small smile. "Is no one else concerned about the League being a part of this? Or that maybe this is a trap set up by Deku?" Ryuko had asked, eyeing the screen. "It is a possibility that we have to accept." Kirishima cautiously raised his hand. Night-Eye gave him a surprised look before nodding, indicating that he should speak. "Who is this Deku guy? I've never heard of him," he asked. Sue nodded, joining in. "And who says Deku is a guy? Looks kind of small, and Deku and Toga were sharing a room together. Maybe Deku is a woman." "Eyewitness accounts from arrested criminals say that Deku is male," Aizawa says. "This is the first time that we've had any visuals on him. I'll admit he is smaller than I expected. The little that we know about Deku is that he's a hacker, for hire, aligned with the League of Villains. He doesn't do on-site work with them, but he does stuff behind the scenes for them. Giran, an underground broker, is the point of contact for outside buyers to get Deku's services. No one's sure of his quirk, with witnesses ranging from saying that he has a fire-based quirk to a gas or pheromone-based quirk, to mental quirks such as analysis or intelligence. No one is positive and no one can give much details. They don't want to cross him, and state that he's unnerving." Rocklock jerked his head toward the screen. "Frappe has a point, though. Deku is tiny. He looks like he's only a few inches taller than Toga. Maybe we should consider that he may be a kid like Toga. Obviously, we know that the villains have no issues using kids in their schemes, and apparently we are much better. You guys can't seriously be considering using these high school students while going up against the Yakuza." "I don't like it any more than you, Rocklock," Aizawa said, letting his head hang slightly. "I made Nezu and Night-Eye promise that if the kids are used in the rescue, then they have to have minor roles. At most, I want them holding the perimeter. With Yakuza and League of Villains involved, I think it's too much of a risk to have students be involved as well." "I hardly think that we should count out all the students. Mirio here is more than capable. All the third years are. They will be graduating in a matter of months and will be fully fledged heroes," Night-Eye said. Aizawa's frown deepened. "They're still kids." "They're 18. They can make their own choices." "I thought that perhaps this argument would arise. That is why I've created a multiple detailed plan for us to review and build upon," Nezu said. "Each involves the students to varying degrees. Should we begin reviewing them and decide which would be best?" All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 10 of Reformation. Chapter 11 will be next. I hope you guys are still enjoying this fic. Make sure to leave your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.